episode with it's your homeboy Quetzalcoatl hitting you up with another video. Today is some special edition type shit. The reason it's special edition type shit is because we're going to talk about Salvador Sanchez. Today's August 12th, 2012, in case you're watching this in the fucking future. And today marks the 30th anniversary of Salvador Sanchez's death. This video is basically going to break down Salvador Sanchez's career, the highlight fights of his career, as well as the elements that led to his death. And this is also a response video to BK Warriors 1. If you don't know who BK Warriors 1 is, he's a person who makes boxing videos here on YouTube. There are very few people who make boxing videos here on YouTube who portray boxing in its true light, who speak the truth about shit. Cause you got all these motherfucking pack-tards that spreading bullshit, and all these other motherfuckers that don't know shit about boxing, that are fucking up boxing, that are part of the reason why boxing is dying if it's not already fucking dead. But BK Warriors 1 is one of those few people who speak the truth about boxing. And I respect BK Warriors 1 and all the shit that he's done throughout this whole time, because I mean, you know, there's others, you know, there's a Cuba 09, you know, TKO 787, but because this is a video about his response video, because he made a video where he was saying that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest fighter of all time. Now, while I don't agree with that, you know, I also respect his opinion, because he actually brings valid points to the table and actually has a superior knowledge of boxing compared to a lot of these other motherfuckers that's making bullshit ass shit on motherfucking YouTube. But we'll get into that later on. You know, right now it's you know, onto Salvador Sanchez. Salvador Sanchez, according to one of these documentaries, because I got a couple DVDs that I'm going to show you, started his career at the age of around 15 or 16. The documentary says 16. He's only had 4 amateur fights. When you compare that to some of the greatest fighters of all time, that's almost unheard of. You know, one person that comes to mind is Muhammad Ali, who had a thorough amateur career. You know, went on to win a gold medal. You know, since today is the last games of the Olympics, you know, I thought I'd go ahead and mention that. You know, Ali won. I don't know what happened to this year's Olympic medalist, but you know, hopefully, you know, America, you know, can return back to the prestige that it once had. But you know, compared to some of the greatest fighters, you know, having 4 amateur fights and turning professional and then having the career that he did have, you know, it's unheard of. And that's one of the things that makes him special. There are other things that make Salvador Sanchez a special fighter. But Salvador Sanchez won his first title at featherweight at the age of 21. I believe he was the youngest fighter at that time to win the featherweight title. He beat Danny Little Red Lopez, knocked him out in the 13th round in their first fight. They also had a rematch in that first fight. Danny Little Red Lopez was a long reigning champion. He had been champion for about 3 or 4 years. You know, he was the type of fighter that he could take punishment. You know, you could come at him and you could build up a lead on him. You could even have him hurt at times. But the thing is that, you know, Danny Little Red Lopez had a lot of power in his punches. You know, he had real heavy hands, and he can come back from that type of stuff. And throughout that whole time, I mean, he had the championship for 3 or 4 years straight. You know, he was able to come back and knock people out. He was a great champion. And Salvador Sanchez was pretty much a relatively unknown fighter at the time. And you know, he came in and he dominated Lopez. You know, in the first fight, you know, he took more of a boxing strategy. You know, he outboxed Danny Little Red Lopez. You know, there were moments in the fight where he would brawl with Lopez, but for the most part, you know, it was a very, you know, at times it was a defensive oriented fight. You know, there were rounds where, you know, he would step back. You know, he would show a lot of head movement and come back with counter punches at times. Then there were, you know, moments in the fight where he would brawl with Danny Little Red Lopez, and he would, you know, come forward. but throughout the whole fight, he was controlling the pace. Danny Little Red Lopez couldn't do anything to try to change the way the fight was going. And by the 13th round, Danny Little Red Lopez was pretty much getting battered. One of the things that Salvador Sanchez had was he had an unbelievable accuracy. You know, his stamina was unreal. He could throw all sorts of punches. And in that 13th round, he ended up catching Danny Little Red Lopez with a huge right hand. And that just sent Danny Little Red Lopez, you know, back towards the ropes and shit. He was wobbly. And Sanchez, if you know, you can watch the fight on YouTube. You know, Sanchez landed a 10-punch combination on that motherfucker, and the referee ended up stopping the fight. A couple fights later, he fought Danny Little Red Lopez in a rematch, and he ended up stopping him again in the 14th round. It was pretty much the same type of fight, but in that fight, he fought more of an aggressive type fight. It wasn't as defensive oriented as the first fight, but that was the thing about Salvador Sanchez. Salvador Sanchez always fought a different fight against the opponent he was fighting with, even if it was the same opponent like Danny Little Red Lopez, which I believe was the only rematch he ever fought in his career. You had him also in fights where he would brawl. He could out-brawl a brawler, which is the next fight that I'm about to talk about. He was so versatile, and that's what made him special. He was great at doing all those things, at brawling and boxing. There wasn't, you know, Salvador Sanchez was the type of fighter that had zero flaws. In 1981, he fought Wilfredo Gomez, and this was a fight that brought Salvador Sanchez recognition. Wilfredo Gomez was the original Mexicutioner. You know how they're talking about Pacquiao is blowing all the Mexicans out right now and stuff like that. They call him the Mexicutioner. Wilfredo Gomez is the original Mexicutioner. You know, he was knocking all kind of great Mexican fighters. He was knocking them the fuck out left and right. And there's a huge rivalry between Mexico and Puerto Rico. You know, and me, you know, me being Mexican, I'm a proud Mexican. You know, I'm part of that. You know, I'm part of that rivalry. You know, anytime Mexicans and Puerto Rican fighters, you know, go at it, you know, I'm going for the Mexican fighters. You know, there are some exceptions, as you know, with the Margarito Cotto rematch. You know, I was going for Cotto because Margarito's a cheating ass motherfucker. At the same time, you know, I don't show favoritism. I'm not a hypnotized motherfucker, you know, like these Pac-Tards ass motherfuckers that just show favoritism and shit because they love Pacquiao. But Wilfredo Gomez at that time was the pound for pound best fighter in the world. And not just the pound for pound best fighter, he was also the pound for pound biggest puncher of his era. You know, this dude had huge power in both hands, doing motherfuckers. One of the greatest brawlers of all time, pound for pound. And going into this fight with Salvador Sanchez, you know, he was talking a whole lot of shit. You know, Wilfredo Gomez was an extremely confident fighter, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know, because he was backing it up. You know, he was knocking motherfuckers out left and right. And the way Salvador Sanchez was, you know, Salvador Sanchez, to me, is probably also one of the best as far as having a poker face, you know, not showing his emotions in the ring or showing that he's hurt or any kind of those indicators that boxers look for in a fight. You know, he has one of the best poker faces in boxing of all time. You know, and that also led into the way he was, you know, during those conferences where Wilfredo Gomez, you know, he wouldn't talk shit to Wilfredo Gomez. Wilfredo Gomez was telling him he was going to destroy him and all this shit. And, you know, Salvador Sanchez just kept quiet. And leading up to that fight, Salvador Sanchez destroyed him. You know, you saw in the Danny Little Red Lopez fight, it was more of a boxing-oriented fight, you know, technical fight that he fought. In this fight, he beat Wilfredo Gomez at his own game. He out-brawled Wilfredo Gomez, destroyed him, knocked him down in the first round. He almost stopped him in the first round. After he knocked him down, you know, he had him towards the corner and was hitting him with hooks. You know, you know, Salvador Sanchez has this way of throwing combinations of hooks that look awkward, and they're landing. They have precision and speed. And this motherfucker got, you know, he was towards the corner. He almost went down again. And but that shows the type of heart that Wilfredo Gomez had. Wilfredo Gomez was able to last 8 rounds after being knocked out in the first round and looking like he was going to get stopped in the first round. Wilfredo Gomez is no joke. If you're gonna look up Salvador Sanchez YouTube videos, look up Wilfredo Gomez while you at it, so you can see the type of caliber fighter that Salvador Sanchez was fighting at this time. This man was in his prime, and Salvador Sanchez just outworked his ass, took his motherfucking heart out his ass, and in the 8th round he just took him out. I remember BK Warriors once saying one of the videos where, Joe Louis does that shit where he puts, his hand out there, he hits you with the right hand. As awkward as that looks, if the fighter is great, it's effective, and that's how he knocked Wilfredo Gomez out. He put the jab out in front of his face and then hit him with a straight right real fast, and then just as Wilfredo Gomez was laying towards the ropes, he just threw like a 7-punch combination on his ass, and Wilfredo Gomez was pretty much gone. Salvador Sanchez's last fight, he had several other fights, but I'm talking about his highlight fights right now, the fights that defined him as a fighter. The last fight he ever had was also one of the fights that defined him, and that was against Azuma the Professor Nelson. Azuma Nelson is arguably, if not arguably, easily the greatest fighter to ever come out of Africa. Azuma Nelson is a fighter from Ghana. And he's he was called the professor, because he was schooling motherfuckers in that ring, and he could brawl with you too. And the reason why this fight defined Salvador Sanchez's career was because Salvador Sanchez ended up being the only man to ever just beat the brakes off of Azuma Nelson, the only man to ever stop Azuma Nelson. And this fight took place in 1982 in July. It was a couple of weeks also before Salvador Sanchez's death. This was also a replacement fight. Salvador Sanchez was originally supposed to fight someone else, and Azuma Nelson was a late replacement. Azuma Nelson showed a lot of heart in this fight. I mean, you see how great Azuma Nelson ended up becoming. And Azuma Nelson had all those elements in this fight. He was a great fighter, and as well as a brawler too. He could brawl with you. And, he was giving Salvador Sanchez a lot of competition in that fight, but he never really put Salvador Sanchez in any trouble. One of the other things that Salvador Sanchez had, was a granite chin. Granite chin, probably one of the best chins in boxing. If you haven't seen Salvador Sanchez's fights, I'll show you a couple of DVDs coming up later, or, you can watch them here on YouTube and shit, but granite motherfucking chin. And unbelievable stamina. And that's what ended up happening was, the times where Azuma Nelson was landing, I mean, it had no effect on Salvador Sanchez. And Salvador Sanchez was outboxing Azuma Nelson and landing very effectively and broke him down, little by little. Midway through that fight, he knocked him down with a nasty left hook. Salvador Sanchez was standing there, and he stood there for about like a good 7 or 8 seconds just measuring Azuma Nelson. And as soon as Azuma Nelson tried to throw the jab, that's when Salvador Sanchez threw that left hook and knocked his ass back towards the ropes. And then that's when he had him, he started going to the body and to the head, and he caught him with a counter left hook, bam, that sent Azuma Nelson down. Azuma Nelson got up, he was showing him that he had heart. But Salvador Sanchez just started breaking him down little by little. And going into the last round, this is old school boxing. Right now they're going 12 rounds. In that time, it was 15. Going into the 15th round, Salvador Sanchez looked like he was going into the first round. Look at all of this man's fights. Not just highlights, not just little shit like that. Look at all of his fights. You will never see this man tired. Probably the best conditioned fighter of all time, bar none. There is nobody that you can name that has better stamina than this man. And going into the 15th round with Azuma Nelson, you saw it. No marks on his face, no bruises, no cuts, never been cut. I've only seen him bruised in 2 fights. That's how great this man is. Never tired. Azuma Nelson was dead tired in the 15th round. Azuma Nelson started coming in. Salvador Sanchez started measuring him. There were moments where he was brawling with Azuma Nelson, just to try to change his strategy so that Azuma Nelson wouldn't try to, see the pattern that Salvador Sanchez was doing, to throw him off, to make him nervous or confused or whatever. In the 15th round, he was strictly boxing with him. He already knew that Azuma Nelson was extremely tired. He was just measuring him, and Azuma Nelson had a whole lot of heart. Azuma Nelson gave it everything he had, but Salvador Sanchez caught him with a clean left hook, coming after a right hand that Azuma Nelson had barely dodged, but he caught him with the left hook, and that had Azuma Nelson on spaghetti legs. And then Salvador Sanchez just landed a 4-punch combination, and that sent Azuma Nelson down. Azuma Nelson got up, and Salvador Sanchez landed 5 consecutive left hooks, and the referee ended up stopping the fight. 3 weeks later, after that fight, that's when Salvador Sanchez died. I give a lot of props to Azuma Nelson, because you saw the career that he ended up doing after that loss. That was a horrible loss. He lost bad. He took a beating in that fight. And there are other fighters. I can name one right now just off the top of my head. Fernando Vargas, who took a bad beating against Tito Trinidad, and was never the same after Trinidad. Trinidad worked his ass, and after that, Fernando Vargas just had a glass jaw. Azuma Nelson was able to come back after that, and he was never stopped again. And like I said, he's the greatest fighter to ever come out of Africa, the greatest African fighter of all time. But that just showed the type of greatness that Salvador Sanchez had. Most Mexican fighters don't have the type of boxing elements that Salvador Sanchez had, and I'll get into that in a moment. But 3 or 4 weeks after he had that fight, Salvador Sanchez died, which today is the 30th anniversary of his death. I'm going to show you a couple videos right now. If you're interested, if you're a boxing collector and you want to collect Salvador Sanchez fights, if you're in the Southern California area, I got these DVDs. I'm from Compton. I got them at the Del Amo Swap Meet, which is one of the only places around here that I know that sells boxing DVDs. If you're not in California or the United States, if you're somewhere, across the world and shit watching this, you can get them on eBay. I've seen them on eBay. But, I'm here to, I want to show you what they look like in case, so you can see what you want to get. One of the DVDs is Grandes Peleas, Volume 6, which this is the Salvador Sanchez versus Juan Laporte fight. Very great fight. If you're interested in Salvador Sanchez or just watching great pugilist boxing, this is a good fight to get. Another fight is Peleas Clásicas 8. And this is the Salvador Sanchez versus Mike Perez fight. I believe this is the fight that led up to the Wilfredo Gomez fight. This was the tune-up fight that he took before that, so you can see how he prepared for the Wilfredo Gomez fight, which was very different than how he fought Wilfredo Gomez, which is very interesting. The next fight is Grandes Peleas 13. And this is the Salvador Sanchez versus Pat Cowdell fight. This was a very good fight. I believe Pat Cowdell is coming out of a British fighter. Went all 15 rounds with Salvador Sanchez. Good fight to watch. Then you got Grandes Peleas 16. This is Salvador Sanchez versus Rocky Garcia. A little bit of history behind this. Salvador Sanchez versus Rocky Garcia was actually the first HBO fight to show lower weight class fighters, because if you know, in the past, boxing has always been about heavyweights and the higher weight classes, and Salvador Sanchez was actually the first featherweight to be televised on HBO, and this was that fight. Now we have Salvador Sanchez versus Rosalio Vadillo in Grandes Peleas 27. Very, very interesting fight. If you are a Salvador Sanchez fan, or if you know about Salvador Sanchez, this is the fight to get right here. One of my favorite fights to get, and I think that this is also one of the arguments to give BK Warriors won in regards to Floyd Mayweather. Now, this was the only fight that you've seen where Salvador Sanchez was legitimately hurt. He got rocked with a huge left hook. And immediately, maybe like 3 seconds later, he recovered and ended up knocking this dude the fuck out. Greatest chin in boxing. Watch this fight. Now we got, this is one of the Grandes Peleas 29. This has 10 different fights. They're all short fights. At the most, maybe they're like 4 rounds. So they bunched them up in 10 fights. And Salvador Sanchez has one of his short 3-round, I believe it was a 3rd round knockout right here. It's a nice little, DVD to pick up because there's also several other fighters: Chavez, De La Hoya, Pacquiao, Juan Manuel Lopez. Depending on who you like, a couple of fighters right here to watch. The fight I was just talking about a while ago. This right here is a special edition. There were 3 volumes that they made for Salvador Sanchez, which were his some of his big highlight fights, which were the fights that I was talking about right now. One of them was Salvador Sanchez versus Wilfredo Gomez, which was the fight that defined him, the fight that put him into stardom. Great fight. There's also a fight versus Ruben Castillo, which was his first title defense, which was also a good fight to watch. And that's right here on Volume 1. Volume 2 of that DVD series is right here. This shows the Azuma Nelson fight, which was Salvador Sanchez's last fight before he died. It also shows a fight against Patrick Ford, which was a good decision fight to watch. If you're a boxing pugilist, is something to pick up. The last DVD I'm going to show is Volume 3, and he shows the 2 fights versus Danny Little Red Lopez. This is also a DVD if you're a Salvador Sanchez fan, something that you would want to pick up, because this is also a DVD that shows a brief documentary. Maybe it's like a 15 or 20 minute documentary throughout the entire DVD. Before the fight, after the fight, before the second fight and after it. They show a brief history about Salvador Sanchez. And one of the things that I found interesting about that DVD, which people should pick up, is that it talked about the stuff that happened to Salvador Sanchez before he died. The day that Salvador Sanchez died, the day before, that August 11th, Salvador Sanchez was training. He was going to fight Juan Laporte in a rematch. It was only a couple fights away. This was during a training camp. After training camp, Salvador Sanchez, according to this documentary, wanted to go buy some speakers for a Porsche, which was the car that he ended up crashing in. He wanted to buy some speakers for it. He ended up going to the shop to get the speakers. After he left, usually when he would do these type of things, going on errands and stuff like that, he would always go with his manager or someone like that. This time, he ended up going by himself. After he did that, he ended up going to a bar. And he was kicking it with friends in this bar, and according to their witness reports, he had one beer, and he stayed there up until 2 in the morning hanging out with them. This was in Salvador Sanchez's hometown, the town of Santiago Tangistenco, which is where he's from, is not really a large city. So getting around isn't really going to take you that much, especially if you're in a Porsche. When he left at 2 in the morning, the authorities estimate that he crashed at I believe it was 5 in the morning, because that's when they reported it. He crashed behind a big rig truck on the freeway. He left that bar at 2 in the morning. What happened between 2 in the morning at 5 in the morning, nobody knows. The trip from the bar to his house was not a 3-hour trip. So that's one of the things that's shrouded in mystery behind his death. I've heard a lot of rumors, saying that certain people wanted him to lose the fight, and he didn't want to lose it, and people took care of him, and all kind of stuff. But I mean, the truth is, nobody knows. But that is something interesting, that those 3 hours of his life, remain a mystery. I'd like to go ahead and commemorate today, since this is the 30th anniversary of his death, of my favorite fighter, Salvador Sanchez. Go ahead and give a salute to my nigga, from Compton, California, and by way of Villanueva, Zacatecas, Corona right here. Salute, my nigga. And now the response to BK Warriors. Okay, BK Warriors said that Salvador Sanchez, not Salvador, nigga, I'm tripping, He said that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest fighter of all time. As I said, I respect, BK Warrior's one opinion. He brought a lot of valid points as to why he believed that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest fighter of all time. But at the same time, he also took away a lot of parameters away from that discussion. And one of those things was that he did not want to include the type of competition, the caliber of opponents that people were fighting, if you're going to compare him to the all-time greats. And that takes away from a lot of fighters. I remember him saying in the video where he was saying that, Ali never went to the body. How could you say Ali wasn't the greatest? How could you say that Ali is the greatest fighter of all time when he rarely went to the body? And while that is true, you also are forgetting the fact, the caliber of opponents that he was fighting and what he ended up doing to them. If you omit the caliber, the way he beat George Foreman, the way he came back and beat Frazier, those 2 times, the type of fights that he had, if you take away that caliber, then of course it's easy to say, well, Ali never went to the body, so that doesn't make him the best fighter. It's because it's being looked through a closed-minded way, and not saying that he's closed-minded, because he talks about a whole lot of other boxing stuff, but it's just that the parameters of the discussion are so limited that they favor Floyd Mayweather as far as the criteria, as far as being, he's saying that Floyd Mayweather is the best fighter of all time because of what he does in the ring, his effectiveness. Everything he does is a 10. But had he fought other caliber fighters or some of the other best fighters of all time, I think that effectiveness would be far, far different. What BK Warriors 1 was saying, that under the conditions that he was saying, that as far as who's the most effective fighter is what they do in the ring, can you name someone else that's a 10 on all the boards? It's Salvador Sanchez. Watch this man's fights. Not just highlights. I'm talking about watch all of this man's fights. I've seen basically every single Floyd Mayweather fight. There's maybe a couple of fights, like his first 10 fights, a couple of those fights that I missed. But for the most part, I've seen almost every single Floyd Mayweather fight. So I know Floyd Mayweather, and I respect Floyd Mayweather. He's one of the all-time greats. I believe, hands down, Floyd Mayweather easily is the best fighter of this generation. But when you talk about the best fighter of all time, Floyd Mayweather's not in that discussion. He's one of the all-time greats, but he's not the best fighter of all time. But someone that is as great as Floyd Mayweather is Salvador Sanchez. You said find somebody that's a 10 on all the boards. That's Salvador Sanchez. Now I'm also gonna discuss the differences in what you were saying. 10 speed, 10 chin, 10 all of that. Like I said, I got mad respect for Floyd Mayweather. What I will give Floyd Mayweather is Floyd Mayweather has superior speed and superior defense to Salvador Sanchez. Salvador Sanchez has 10 speed and 10 defense, but it's not on the caliber of Floyd Mayweather. You see what I'm saying? But there are stuff that Salvador Sanchez does that Floyd Mayweather doesn't have. But like I said, Salvador Sanchez doesn't have the speed that Floyd Mayweather has, and he doesn't have the defense that Floyd Mayweather has. But he's a 10 at speed and defense. Floyd Mayweather is a 10 at chin. Like you said, I'll agree with that. I'll go with that. You saw that with Cotto. Castillo was giving a lot of problems, and we're gonna get into that Castillo fight too. But I'm just talking about the chin right now. He has I'll give him the 10 in chin, but he ain't got Salvador Sanchez's chin. Salvador Sanchez probably has the best chin in boxing. That's what I mean by they both 10s, but it's different. stamina. I ain't seen Floyd Mayweather tired like that, but he ain't got the stamina that Salvador Sanchez has. They both tens, but there's a huge difference in that. And there's no argument in that. Just like there's no argument with the speed that Floyd Mayweather is faster. Heart. Oh yeah, Floyd Mayweather showed heart, but Salvador Sanchez got way more heart. And this is one of the things that defines Mexican boxing. I will say that black fighters, whether they're from Cuba, Azuma Nelson, who's straight out of Africa, or black people from here, from America, to me, from what I've seen, is they're the most physically gifted fighters. Some of the best technical fighters of all time. And that's what has made black fighters so great. Blacks and Mexicans dominate boxing. Now, what makes Mexicans stand out is their heart. Most Mexican fighters don't have a lot of boxing ability as far as technical fighting like black fighters do. But what makes them stand out is they have a whole lot of heart. They'll go toe to toe. They can get beat and come back and end up knocking you out. The definition of heart is Mexican boxing. And what makes you have other fighters that were also great technical fighters like Eric Morales and Juan Manuel Marquez, who you've seen in this generation, who are also great boxers. But Salvador Sanchez was someone who had it all. Great boxer, great brawler, speed, power, stamina, chin, heart, and entertaining. Since there are scopes that are being limited, since there are as far as the level of competition is, that element is taken out, then you can add other elements. Then if you could say that if Salvador Sanchez, one of the things that doesn't make him stand out as far as the greatest fighters of all time, because I don't think either Salvador Sanchez or Floyd Mayweather is the greatest fighter of all time. But if what makes Salvador Sanchez not be put in that discussion is the fact that he died at 23. He died very young, but he fought high caliber fighters. He ended up with a record of 44 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. That's what makes Salvador Sanchez stand out. And what I was saying about Jose Luis Castillo, the reason I'm comparing him to Floyd Mayweather is, one of the things that people might say is, well, Floyd Mayweather's undefeated. Salvador Sanchez, he's lost once and have a draw. And he had a draw. Well, you need to look behind the history of those 2 fights. Look up those 2 fights, and you can see that both of those were hometown fights, and they were horrible decisions, according to most boxing experts and anybody who was there watching the fight. But newsflash, like motherfucking Floyd Mayweather, he's not undefeated. Like I said, as great as Floyd Mayweather is, I'm not taking nothing away from him, but he has been beat. He did not beat Jose Luis Castillo in that first fight. There was no way. I've watched that fight several times. There is no way you could tell me that Floyd Mayweather beat Jose Luis Castillo. And the other questionable fight is with Oscar de la Hoya. And he fought an old ass Oscar de la Hoya. And that fight could have gone either way. That fight should have been a draw. And Floyd Mayweather ended up getting the decision. And, you kind of saw HBO riding Floyd Mayweather's dick a little bit like they riding Pacquiao dick. It's happened before. It's happened with Oscar de la Hoya. HBO been on his dick for a while. It's happened with different fighters. And in that moment, Floyd Mayweather got the nod, but that should have been a draw. And one of the other things too, if you believe that Floyd Mayweather beat Jose Luis Castillo, whether it's BK Warriors 1 or anybody else, let's do a video where we both watching the motherfucking fight, on a webcam or some shit, and we both commentating on the fight, and let's see if Floyd Mayweather really won that fight. Because I don't believe that, but like I said, that doesn't take away anything away from the greatness of Floyd Mayweather. But if you want to talk about somebody that's on that caliber, on that level, that's Salvador Sanchez. 10 on all the boards. But like I said, much respect to BK Warriors 1. I hope you watch these Salvador Sanchez fights, and Let's see your response. You know, this is Quetzalcoatl signing the fuck on now. Hit the like button, subscribe button. A la verga.